A duchess's raw memory, a father's careful olive branch, and a crown's hardest boundary collided this week in a way that revealed more about the modern monarchy than any balcony wave ever could. Hello, dear viewers, and welcome back to our channel, where we look past the headlines and listen for the heartbeat of the House of Windsor. On a day the world sets aside for remembrance, Sarah Ferguson, the Duchess of York, spoke softly but unmistakably. She did not reach for rhetoric or grand language, she reached for the truth she lived. She was in New York on September 11, 2001. She remembers the shock that seemed to freeze time, the heartbreak that came in waves as the day unfolded, and the extraordinary courage of ordinary people who ran toward danger because someone needed them to. Her words, precious lives, never forget, were the kind that sit in your chest and stay there, because you know they are not crafted, they are carried. That simple note would have resonated in any year, but this year its echo traveled down a corridor at Clarence House, where, according to well-placed briefings, King Charles received his younger son behind closed doors. No motorcades, no formal portraits, no lines to read, just a father and a son, a pot of tea going cold between them, and the weight of years on the table. If you have ever had to say the first word after a long silence, you know what kind of courage that takes. The meeting did not pretend to solve what time and distance created, but it did something precious all the same. It placed two people in a room and left the cameras outside. For a monarchy trying to keep faith with a country that asks for steadiness more than spectacle, that is not a small thing. And yet, even as one door cracked open, another remained decisively shut. The King's position on Prince Andrew is not a rumor, not a mood, not a temperature that changes with the news cycle. It is a line. No return to public duties. No soft re-entry through minor engagements. No invitation to test the public's memory against the pageant's glow. It is the difference between family and function, between forgiveness and reinstatement, between private love and public trust. If that seems harsh, consider the bargain the monarchy asks the nation to make: lend us your attention and respect, and we will hold ourselves to a standard that earns it. The bargain breaks the moment standards blur. This is where Sarah Ferguson's voice matters more than many realize. She has known both the velvet and the thorn of royal life. She has stood in the light and she has stood outside the gates, she has been a headline and she has had to live through the aftermath. On the 9th of November she chose to be one thing only, a witness. She remembered the ash on the sidewalks, the stunned quiet broken by sirens, the strangers who opened their doors and their arms because there was no other answer to the day. Her insistence, out of unimaginable tragedy came kindness, unity, resilience, was not about the past alone. It was a measure for the present. What do we do with pain? Do we let it harden us, or do we let it teach us how to carry each other better? Seen through that lens, the week's royal movements come into focus. The Clarence House conversation was not a set piece, it was an act of respect for a son, for a father, for a nation tired of seeing private grief played out on public stages. The continued exclusion of Andrew from public life was not a punishment chosen once and revisited for convenience, it was the logical outcome of a promise the institution believes it must keep. The monarchy does not exist to save every individual reputation within its walls. It exists to serve the country that allows it to continue. Where those two duties collide, a sovereign must choose the crown over comfort. That is what stewardship looks like when you cannot please everyone and dare not try. For many of you, especially our audience who remember watching a young queen become an anchor, you recognize in Charles the difficult inheritance of a very long reign. He cannot be his mother, no one can be. But he can borrow the part of her that mattered most, the instinct to hold the center when the weather turns. That instinct looks like compassion at the table and clarity at the threshold. It looks like a quiet meeting that will not be photographed and a firm boundary that will not be blurred. It looks like choosing process over performance, even when performance would play better on the nightly news. There is a temptation, always, to read every move as strategy. Sometimes it is simpler than that. Sometimes a father meets a son because he is a father. Sometimes a door stays closed because opening it would tell the nation that lines do not matter. And sometimes a woman who has known both royal privilege and public penance speaks about a day of terror with a gentleness that reminds us of what is worth guarding. Sarah Ferguson's message did not invoke titles or rooms she has sat in. It invoked firefighters climbing stairs, nurses who never went home, volunteers who formed a chain of hands across a city. It said the only royalty that mattered on that day wore turnout gear and hospital scrubs. Hary's path remains his own. He has built work he believes in and a life beyond the duty roster. That does not erase the ache of a shared childhood or the difficulty of a shared spotlight. A single hour at Clarence House will not rewrite a book, unsay an interview, or calm every commentator who thrives on the word feud. But the human truth remains. Most reconciliations begin not with triumph but with a small, awkward, necessary beginning. You do not run a marathon with a first step. You do start it that way. Andrew's path is just as clear, if far less tender. There are places in public life that cannot be regained because the public's trust is not a staircase you climb back up by charm or by time served. In this, the king has chosen the harder way, and for that reason the safer way. A monarchy that blurs its lines is a monarchy that teaches the country those lines were never real. If you have asked whether standards still mean anything, the answer is in the silence around Andrew's diary. It is also in the steadiness of the Prince and Princess of Wales, who continue to shoulder the visible rhythm of service without commentary or complaint, understanding that the center is held in hours, not headlines. What makes this moment feel consequential is not drama but proportion. The late Queen taught proportion by instinct: speak rarely, act steadily, let time be your ally. Charles is finding his own version. He will speak more than she did, he will convene, nudge, and cajole on causes that predate his reign. But when the question is existential, who stands where, who carries what, who returns and who does not, he has shown a firmness that understands the difference between mercy and amnesia. Mercy is quiet and personal and can go on for years. Amnesia is public and contagious and takes down more than the person it absolves. Sarah Ferguson's remembrance threaded the needle between grief and gratitude. She named the heartbreak but refused to end there. That is not naivete, that is discipline. The discipline to look again at the worst day and choose to honor the best in it. If the monarchy hopes to make sense to the country it serves, it must practice that same discipline. It must acknowledge what has broken and then, without fanfare, do the next right thing. Sometimes that thing is a private knock on a door. Sometimes it is a printed line that says, simply, no. For our viewers who have lived enough life to be skeptical of easy answers, your instincts are sound. This is not a fairy tale rediscovered or a scandal resolved. It is a family trying to learn from the very lessons Sarah Ferguson pressed into the week, that dignity is built by what we do when it costs us. The firefighters did not climb because someone would applaud. The nurses did not hold hands in emergency rooms because it would look good later. They did it because it was right. Leadership, of a city or a crown or a household, is the same. Do what is right, keep at it, and trust that time and consistency will do what spin cannot. So we end where we began, with a duchess's quiet witness, a father's guarded welcome, and a boundary that holds. We will never forget the lives lost on the 9th of November. We will not forget the kindness that followed, either. And we will watch, calmly, critically, and with hope as a reign chooses, again and again, the narrow path between compassion and consequence. If this resonated with you, if you remember precisely where you were that morning, if you have thoughts about the Clarence House meeting, if you believe second chances and standards can share the same house, add your voice below. Your perspective makes this community wiser. And if you value thoughtful royal analysis without the noise, tap like and subscribe so you never miss our next update.